The Husker baseball team rolled Purdue, lost the walk-off game, which I'm sure pissed them off. They probably should have won all four. They didn't. They went 3-1, dominated the last three games completely. Pitching looked really good. Now they play two teams that I think are closer to where Nebraska is in Ohio State and Iowa. And you wrote a really nice piece yesterday about the freshmen. They're going to get tested, obviously, this weekend, a whole different level of competition. What did you see from Nebraska in that first and that opening weekend? And then what are you watching for this weekend when you're going to be up there and kind of watching them in person?
Well, yeah, like I wrote, the story to me from the opening weekend was the newcomers. I mean, at different points in that first weekend, Nebraska starts three freshmen on the infield. Max Anderson was at third. Jack Stile played Sunday at first and hit that big home run that iced it. Bryce Matthews was the second baseman. He played every game without an error on the infield and had a bases clearing double in one of the games. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do anyway, but it's harder to do in a year like this when every team's roster is deeper than ever because guys didn't go pro, because guys chose to return for their extra senior year, super senior year, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's even more notable that those guys were able to do what they did right off the bat. And then you look on the pitching side, a number of guys came in mostly to strengthen the bullpen. Guys like Jake Buns, who started but went 3 innings. Cody Frank was a guy that had a good outing. Cam Wynn was a transfer from A&M who came in. Chance Roach was a guy from New Mexico State who thought his career was over a year ago, but the pandemic allowed him to transfer. And there he is, giving Nebraska a quality start on Saturday and going 6 of the 7 innings in that one 7-inning game that they played and won. So that was the most notable thing to me. And then you have the other guys on the team that you kind of know what they bring. Spencer Schmellenbach was very good as a hitter, as a fielder. He finished that game Sunday touching 97 miles an hour with a fastball.
He's special. Yeah, he's a great athlete overall.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do with him moving forward because they want to use him as often as they can on the mound, but they have to balance that with how he plays shortstop and his arm there. And they've even talked about down the line in a key situation starting him in a game. So we'll see how that builds up. But he's a guy I've seen now projected to go top 5, top 3 rounds of the Major League draft this summer. So this is almost certainly his last year as a Husker. And it's a shame because Nebraska missed out on him last year with just the 15 games that was cut short. So my sense is this is almost certainly his last year. And so it's going to be fun to watch him. But, I think just big picture, you go 3-1 against a team like Purdue. That's not a good team. It's not a great team. They have a lot of seniors and they'll be competitive in some games, but that's what good teams do is you beat teams like that. They should have gone 4-0. Like you said, they blew 3 leads of 1 run and then eventually got walked off Friday, but they came back and just dominated the rest of the way, which was impressive. And like you said, this weekend is different. It kind of takes a step up. Iowa is a really balanced team. Ohio State maybe has the best pitching depth in the Big Ten. I mean, they go 12 or 13 guys deep that they feel good about putting in. So it'll be a challenge for this Nebraska offense, which, yes, hit 5 home runs and showed some versatility, but it also struck out 46 times and did not hit in the clutch against Purdue. So we'll see kind of how that changes. But the defense was good. The coaches have believed that the defense might be one of the best, around, and they certainly showed that on the first weekend. Their only error this weekend was a catcher's interference that they had in the first game, which put a guy on. But other than that, they were flawless in the field. Their ERA is currently a top 10 in the nation sort of situation. So that you can see the pieces kind of coming together here. But so they've got 4 now in Minneapolis, 2 against Ohio State, 2 against Iowa. And we'll just see how it holds over. Purdue's offense is not good. They're one of the worst power hitting teams in the country. So how does the pitching staff hold up against Iowa, which has considerably more power, against Ohio State, which has a freshman named Cade Kern, who's going to be one of the top newcomers in college baseball. It's just a different challenge. And the turf there apparently plays a little slow. The dimensions of the park are odd. Like they push back the stands in right field, like where the stands would be along a football sideline. They just kind of push those back. I don't know exactly the dimensions of the park, but it's a very odd, kind of awkward configuration when they move those stands back. You can see the yard markers on the baseball field. There were games played there last weekend between some other teams. Here's another fun fact for you, Sam, and I didn't realize this until this week. This is Nebraska's home pod. So the Big Ten, in their creative scheduling this year, each team has a pod, a 3-team pod where the home team plays 2 other teams, and then those 2 other teams play. Nebraska is the only Big Ten school that is not hosting its own pod in its home city. So they're playing theirs. They are the home team this weekend at US Bank. Every other school has one in its own park except Minnesota, which has its at US Bank. So for the people out there who think the Big Ten is out to get Nebraska, here's a little bit more fuel for that. They also got some, by the way, when Max Anderson, who goes 8 for 15, doesn't get freshman of the week from the Big Ten. They gave it to like a Maryland pitcher who had a quality start or something like that. But something to add to the fire there. But for sure, this is a weekend where I think you get a closer sense of where Nebraska is in the pecking order in the Big Ten. And if they split or they go 3-1 again, then I think you start, viewing them as a top 4, top 5 type team. And then suddenly those games down the line against Michigan and Indiana get a little more interesting too.
Well, so somebody had to have the first home pod, right? And so I guess that was Nebraska or.
Yeah, they were given it early. This was their designated pod weekend, and they didn't feel comfortable having it at Haymarket because they had to make
wisely so. They wouldn't have played the stupid games.
Well, right. They had to make this decision. They had to make this decision a month ago, and with weather considerations. Plus, it's not just Nebraska playing the games; it's these other teams as well, and they didn't feel like the grass would be ready for that. So, so they're playing up in Minnesota this weekend, and they lose that. But ultimately, they end up playing the same amount of home games as everybody else. I think it's 16 home games, which is uniform across the league. So it'll be interesting. I did a little looking. This was their first set of indoor games since they were at Minute Maid Park in Houston 6 years ago. So kind of an unusual sort of deal for them to play inside. But, given how the Big Ten is set up their schedule, this is a way that they can get in games in cold weather. So that's what they're going to do.
Well, I'll be listening with interest. This is going to be an important weekend, I think, just because, like you said, I was a pretty prolific hitting team. And so I would think that Will Bolt is always going to have a pretty good offense, and they appear to have one. But it'll just be, that young pitching staff, how they do against Iowa and Ohio State. Bolt's offenses were pretty good when he was working under Erstad. I mean, that was not the issue with those teams. I remember them playing in the Big Ten tournament one year, and I think they lost like 10-9 to Michigan State or something. They just could not get guys out. So we'll see how that goes this weekend. What would success look like? I always ask that question. What would success this weekend look like?
Well, I think they at least 2-2. I think you got to split at the very least. The way that it sets up for Nebraska, they avoid Ohio State's big ace, Seth Lonsway, this weekend. So Ohio State doesn't even have a starter named for their Sunday game yet. And it'll probably be a bullpen game. But so, yeah, I think 2-2 would be the floor. And if you can go 3-1, that'd probably be the more realistic, optimistic sort of outcome that you could have for Nebraska. And then just, again, show signs that what happened last weekend is sustainable. Have a bullpen that can come through in high leverage spots, have some starters that can give you some run. I think Cade Povich bouncing back. He had a rough start. He's supposed to be their Friday guy. He had the shakiest outing on the first weekend, but I think he's maybe their best starter in that rotation. So I'll be interested to see how he bounces back this weekend. I think you can kind of attribute a lot of that to nerves because he was uncharacteristically wild. So that'll be something to watch. And then, again, the offense has a ton of talent. I think they can go 10, 11, 12 deep in terms of their lineup. It's just a matter of can you put the ball in play in key spots instead of striking out? Like a sacrifice fly to left with runners on the corners is way better than striking out. They couldn't quite do that in the first weekend. Can you just come through in the clutch on occasion? And I think if they can, they have a ton of talent to go from there. So just continuing this thing, showing that what they did against a lower end of the league's team like Purdue that can carry over. And if it can, I think they're in this thing for most of the season. There's no reason to think they can't compete with some of these better teams, and should be fun to watch.